Hello, 49er Faithful. This is Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and with me tonight is Rohan Chakravarthi from the 49ers Web Zone, mixing it up a little bit. Normally we do Hammer and Nails on Thursday night, but with the NFL schedule coming upon us and week one hitting, things are a little bit different now. So we got Rohan with me tonight, and I'm excited to have Rohan here. He's one of the up and coming content creators, writers, whatever you want to call them, around the 49ers, and so he's not even here anymore. He's out in Wisconsin, so he's kind of almost behind enemy lines for us. How you doing, Rohan?
I'm doing good, and I'm glad that you got me instead of that fool Jesse Naylor with his fake beard out here. I know I know the fans probably appreciate my face more than that beard. I'm kidding. Thank you so much for having me on, Jack. It's obviously a pleasure to be on with you. And yeah, we got football finally. I mean, we got the game tonight, the Bills versus the Rams, but the most important game, that's on Sunday. 49ers face off against the Bears. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited. I can't wait to get out there. I'm going to be going to the game. I'll be in Chicago on Sunday for the game, so I'm looking forward to that. First time I get to get on a plane to go watch a 49er game, so really looking forward to it. Real quick, before we get going, I do want to shout out a couple folks in the comment section. We have a couple of them over there. We have Quesadola Thrilla, 71, member of the Toolbox. Are you all ready for some football? It is a Thursday night party. Yes. And got the game on in the background. And then Raphael 5629ers, another member of the Toolbox, says, "What's up, Jack? Rohan, members of the Toolbox and everyone. Good to have you on board, Raphael." Let's get into it, Rohan. Let's get into some of the news around the 49ers this week. We've got real quick, we got one other guy. I want to mention this one. Throw us another two. Master Spin 77 says, "Looking forward to your report on the game." Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting out there. It's going to be fun. A few things that are happening around the 49ers right now. Number one, they named their captains yesterday. Kyle Shanahan, during his press conference, dropped the news. We hadn't seen the list yet, so he was asked about it, and he let us know that the 49ers captains include Eric Armstead, Fred Warner, and Jimmy Ward, and Nick Bosa, so 4 from the defense, and then 2 from the offense, George Kittle and Trent Williams. No Trey Lance. You make anything about the fact that Trey Lance wasn't named as a captain for the 49ers?
Now, a lot of people in a way thought that this was negative towards Trey Lance, and I'll get to that side in a minute. But initially, I tweeted out something about it when I heard the news, and it wasn't actually negative. But to me, I actually thought this was interesting that Trey Lance. For those of you that don't know, Lance was voted 7th. And there were only 6 captains, so he was essentially the first one out. I found it interesting that Lance was voted over Deebo Samuel and Kyle Juszczyk in the voting, despite being pretty much a rookie this year. I thought Deebo Samuel and Kyle Juszczyk might have been a little higher on the voting chart. Am I worried? No, because I think I saw you put it on the timeline, and it was something that I researched as well. Go back to 2018. The 49ers paid Jimmy Garoppolo $137.5 million. You expect a player of that caliber and at the quarterback position to be a captain in his first year starting. That wasn't the case. Garoppolo was not a captain in 2018. And the one thing that stood out to me this year it seemed in a way a little intentional. The 49ers carried 7 captains in 2021 and 2020. This year, they're only carrying 6 captains. And it seems kind of intentional because Lance is that 7th guy. To me, a couple of people viewed this as an indictment on Lance and that they aren't comfortable with Lance or whatever you might say. Me personally, I think it's a challenge. Kyle Shanahan kind of telling Trey Lance, you got to earn your place. And once you do, you're going to be a captain, which I expect in 2023, similar to how the 49ers handled Jimmy Garoppolo, making him a captain in 2019 after he played just 3 games in 2018 before the injury.
Yeah, and I think you just laid it out there really good. I mean, the fact that I didn't really make that big of a deal of it either. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I know that there were a number of questions asked during the press conference when I was sitting there, and those were good questions to ask. Why not? Does it concern you? You know, all those kind of things. Those were solid questions that you need to ask. And at the same time, I think pretty much everybody else also understood that it's not really that big of a deal. Trey Lance, I think and you pointed it out, the fact that he came in 7th in the voting, that shows the way that his teammates think of him. It shows that the guys in that locker room believe in him, feel like he's a leader, somebody that should be a captain for this team. the fact that Kyle Shanahan decided to go with 6 instead of 7, I've seen some people, make note of it. But when it comes to the captaincy part, I don't think it's a big deal. He's going to be the leader when they step onto the field, whether he has the C on his jersey or not. He's going to be one of the leaders on the field. And you already hit on the point about Garoppolo not being a captain in 2018 even after the Flyers made a big commitment to him. It's just a matter of going out and earning your stripes, like Master Spin 77 says here, and also you mentioned it as well. So the fact that he even was as high as he was at 7, that shows, I think, where the team is on Trey Lance as far as the players in that locker room.
I agree. I think it's more so a positive than a negative. And the other point that I'll mention about Trey Lance and all, to me, captaincy is kind of just like just a term. It doesn't mean anything really. And I know Trey Lance said in the press conference, which I'm sure you heard as well when you were out there, was that he wants to be a captain. That's cool because he wants to be recognized as a leader of this football team. But overall, this team is going to ride through Trey Lance through the ups and the downs. He is the quarterback of the team. He is in command of the offense. He's the one calling audibles. He's the one running the offense. So even if he's not given that moniker of a captain, he's going to be the captain regardless. And the second point that I want to make, I think this storyline is kind of just making getting bigger than it should be, because when you look at the other 5 starters that were in the 2020 class, in Lawrence, pick 1, obviously Fields, Mac Jones, and then Davis Mills and Zach Wilson, all 5 of those players are captains this year. But one other point that you got to mention is when you look at the rosters of those teams, the 49ers have a much better roster than all of those players. And not only it doesn't matter on the roster, they've got more leaders on those teams. A lot of the other teams are inexperienced. They're more young. They're shifting away from their veteran talent. You saw the Bears cut 5 or 6 players to pick up waiver wires because they want to shift to a more youthful approach. The 49ers aren't like that. When you look at the players that are captains, I don't believe a single player or actually I think third year in the NFL is the minimum so far. So Trey Lance in his second year in the NFL to get at number 7 over some accomplished and established players, I think that's a good thing for him.
Yeah, and you mentioned like how it's picking up some steam around. I think really what it is Trey Lance. Anything you talk about with Trey Lance generates numbers, and so people aren't stupid. They know that if you write something about Trey Lance, they're going to get the clicks that they need. They're going to get the views that they want. That's what we all do it for, right? All of the newspapers that we write for, the sites that we write for, they want to get eyeballs to their page. So you write about what people want to see, and Trey Lance is what people want to hear about. And so bringing it up, whether it's a positive or a negative, that's what you're going to do. And so it makes sense from that. I understand it. I think that if you're watching from the far and you're watching the 49ers, you know that Trey Lance is going to be a guy that he's a captain. That's somebody that they're going to focus on. Really quick, because I haven't talked to you about this, because this all happened last week while we weren't together. But what do you make? I mean, this whole Jimmy Garoppolo to the 49ers thing, really quick, and you're hearing people talk like Peter King say, Trey Lance is going to be on the bench by week 7 if he's not performing, or whatever it was that he said, something along those lines. What do you make of the whole Jimmy Garoppolo to San Francisco thing?
Now, I'm going to speak of it in 2 perspectives. One, from the team perspective, this is it's a great move. When you talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, he had no value. He had non-existent value on his $27.5 million salary. And with the fact that he was pretty much every team in the NFL knew that he was going to be released if he was going to make that money. Now the 49ers essentially reset that deadline by making the salary $6.5 million in base salary. Obviously, the cap hits around $12 million. You have a much more manageable salary, and now the threat of release is no longer there. So teams understand that the only way that they can acquire his services, which right now is probably one of the hottest assets on the market. I know he's not officially on the market, but potentially available on the market. They're going to have to trade for him. So the 49ers reset that trade window to the trade deadline. And the other part was, look, this situation goes out in 2 ways. You either have the best backup in the NFL, or you have a trade asset that you can move once another starter gets injured, which both ways is beneficial. But as for Trey Lance, I don't think this has any any inclination about how the 49ers feel about Trey Lance. This was more so from a team perspective, trying to better their roster, not only by keeping Garoppolo as a purely as a backup, if only Lance gets injured, or by trading him, which improves their roster with draft picks or with other capital in some way. So to me, I personally believe that this is not at all an indictment on Trey Lance. I think he's the starter unless he gets injured, at which point he'll return to the starter once he's not injured anymore, because he was the guy they invested 3 first-round picks in, regardless of how he goes, ups and downs. I don't know. I think Kyle Shanahan has kind of made it abundantly clear. People are kind of overlooking Kyle Shanahan's words. I honestly think he's made it abundantly clear that he's sticking with Trey Lance, and the narratives out there that he might not be the guy for this entire season, I think they're false.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And CJ Gray says, yo, Rohan with Jack Hammer. Super excited about that. I am too. I know what you just said is really very similar to what I was saying last week. This is the people that were getting upset about it, who are the Trey Lance fans that were getting upset about it. My response back to them was, this isn't a big deal. I don't think the locker room is going to be an issue. If the locker room is an issue, then the team's not as strong as we thought it was. Trey, I don't think, all the talk about, is Jimmy Garoppolo going to replace Trey Lance? No, he's not going to replace Trey Lance. If you watched, all I had to do was watch last year to know how that whole thing went down with Jimmy Garoppolo and Kyle Shanahan, to know how this season's going to play out. You go back through Kyle Shanahan's career as an offensive coordinator and a head coach, he's never been one to pull his quarterbacks in and out, at least if it was his starting quarterback, right? He did it a little bit, when he had Brian Hoyer and CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins, but none of those guys were really starting caliber. When he had his guy, even if it was Jimmy Garoppolo or RG3 in Washington or in Atlanta, what have you, he never moved off of the starter, and I don't think it's ever going to happen with the 49ers. I think my thing last week, and what I said, I'll repeat it. Kyle Shanahan is smart enough to understand what the repercussions are of making a move like that, and that's why he doesn't do it, because he understands the dynamics and what goes into that. And he kind of mentioned as much yesterday. And you can make that move, and it might help you for these next 2 quarters, but how's it going to impact you next week, 3 months down the road, a year down the road? He sees all that. He understands it, and that's the difference between Kyle Shanahan and some of the other head coaches that have failed in the NFL. I'm not saying that Shanahan's failed in any way. I'm just saying some of the guys who have not been able to manage that quarterback position correctly.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to talk about, you talk about Kyle Shanahan. I think, like, a lot of people are afraid that they're going to make the switch at quarterback. I think the opposite argument can be made based on last year. You saw how Kyle Shanahan stuck with Jimmy Garoppolo despite 2 injuries to preserve that connection between him and the rest of the offense. He was fully injured, and he had a sprained shoulder. He had the torn UCL injury, and he stuck with him. I think that's a huge way of showing how Kyle Shanahan is sticking with his guys. If he has the game plan, he's going to go with the game plan. And right now, it's been fairly abundantly clear that Trey Lance is the game plan for 2023 and beyond. And the other point I want to make, another thing that a lot of people talked about, Garoppolo's no trade clause. In my opinion, it's worthless. And the reason was he's had it in a way, unofficially, this entire offseason. Why? Because no team was going to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, at least towards the end of the offseason, on his $27.5 million cap hit, or $26.5 million cap hit. So to me, he essentially would have to choose his next destination, because he's the one who's going to have to agree to a restructured contract with another team, and he can refuse to do so with any team. So to me, instead of waiting for a team to do that, the 49ers extended their deadline, as I said, by doing the restructure that would have happened anyways themselves and adding the no trade clause. So in a way, while it's now a formality, I honestly thought it's been there all offseason. And how the contract is, there's no change. It's only the contract that he'd received from another team during this restructure process if a trade were to materialize. He now has in place, and now teams can negotiate based on a fixed price rather than having to continue that negotiation of trying to figure out a trade.
Yeah, the no trade clause was already there in his contract one that before. It's just there because this gives him a little bit of, he can decide if he wants to go or not. And if he doesn't want to go somewhere, if it's a bad situation that wants him, he's not going to just go anywhere. He wants to be in the right place. So I just don't see that as a big deal at all. We have real quick, wanted to bring this up. Dabada says, "Hey Jack, nice to see Rohan is still here even after going off to college." It is. He actually reached out. Actually, I think he had said he was ready to start streaming again, and so I said, "Well, let's do it." And then one thing led to another, and Jesse had some other commitments tonight, and so here we go. Rohan taking over it's now the Hammer and Rohan show on Thursday nights right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, as I said earlier, always appreciate you having me on, and glad we can get back to this, because this definitely a show in the week that I enjoy, and I hope that the fans enjoy as well.
Yeah, we went through a lot of discussion on the quarterbacks. Let's transition now. We went through the captains earlier, and right now it looks like 2 of those 6 captains might not be on the field on Sunday in Chicago. Jimmy Ward already on injured reserve, and then we also have George Kittle, who might not play now because of a groin injury. Kind of, what do you make of the whole issue there with Kittle?
Kittle's injury is interesting, right? It happened on Monday. I wanted to ask you, because I didn't follow, was Sunday an off day or not?
It was.
Interesting. This is now the next injury in the line that Kyle Shanahan talked about earlier, where players are getting injured coming off days. Same thing happened with Jimmy Ward and his hamstring injury. And Kyle Shanahan said that it was a problem. To me, I'm curious as to how the problem hasn't been fixed, be it a difference in training regimen, be it something. And I understand injuries are commonplace in the NFL. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a pattern with these injuries. And so obviously it's a player who has been injured consistently in the past, not saying injury prone necessarily, but he has been consistently injured in the past. And now with the same pattern that the 49ers have been injured, or the same pattern that fellow 49ers have been injured with, George Kittle now has that similar injury. Groin, probably out week 1 at the moment because he didn't practice today. I'd be surprised that he'd play, especially given it's the Chicago Bears. Like in the large scope of things, it's not a big deal. If he misses the first 2 weeks, the 49ers should be able to win without George Kittle in weeks 1 and 2. But overall, you want your star players to be healthy and on the field. And injuries have been the issue that have plagued the 49ers in past years, making it an interesting development, right? Because when you talk about the injuries, what have been the two seasons that the 49ers didn't make the playoffs in the Shanahan era, back in 2020 and 2018, when they could have been anticipating a playoff run, those were because of injuries. You saw a ton of injuries, Garoppolo obviously being the headline, but now, it's not that a ton of injuries are trickling in already, but you've got a star player in Jimmy Ward out, and by reports could be out more than the 4 weeks. And then now you've got George Kittle out, likely week 1.
Yeah, I think the Kittle injury, if is a big deal. We've seen it in the past with this team. He's so important to their running game in particular. They just haven't used him quite as much in the passing game in recent years. I think you can almost call it. Injury prone is. What do you say about somebody who, if he doesn't play on Sunday, it'll mark it'll go. You have to go all the way back to 2018 since the last time that George Kittle has been able to play a full schedule. More than 14 games or more was in 2018. So there's definitely something to it. And there's also something to what you mentioned, the fact that the long layoff, the first day back after a long layoff, and you get another soft tissue injury. It's definitely something that's coming up. And you made an astute observation there earlier when you mentioned that, because it seems like every time they come back, there's some kind of injury like that. A lot of them have been hamstrings, but this one, a groin for Kittle. And that's an issue. And I'm don't know if that's something, I know it's the Bears, and I think a lot of people are overlooking the Bears. I think that I don't think this game is going to be the blowout that a lot of people are kind of chalking it up to be.
I agree. Yeah.
So I think this could be a big injury for the Flyers because of all the things that Kittle does and the way that he impacts the offense in the running game. Real quick, while Rohan's taking a drink of water, Bryant Culp, a member of the Toolbox, says, "What's up, Jack?" Not much, man. I'm on here streaming with Rohan from Wisconsin, getting ready for the game, getting ready to get on an airplane here on Saturday morning, bright and early, to get out to Chicago. So I'm excited about it. Looking forward to getting out there. And then real quick, Andrew just asked, Jack, is Jesse really busy, or is he still mad at you for laying down the facts? No, Jesse does he does a thing on his. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's where the game's on and he's kind of commenting on it. I think he has another 49er fan that's doing it with him. So he'll be doing all the Thursday night games, all the 49er games. I'm not sure if he's doing Monday night as well. So when you're done here, go check that out over on his. Go check it out on Twitter, and I think there's a link over there. I'm not sure if you can get to it through his YouTube channel, but no. Mm-hmm. So that as far as him getting angry with me, no, we're just going to have to rearrange our schedules a little bit for that to work. So we're working on that as I speak. So one, hit that up and just make sure that squash the rumors, Rohan. All right, now one more topic before we get into the game on Sunday. Jaquiski Tartt is a free agent. He got cut by the Philadelphia Eagles recently, and there was a lot of talk about him joining the 49ers. Doesn't look like that's in the cards. He went on 95.7 The Game. Was talking a little bit about the situation and said, he knows his worth and he's not going to play for the minimum. I was kind of wanting to get your thoughts on what you think about Jaquiski Tartt.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like the minimum comment was very interesting, given that his last two contracts have been for the minimum, and he's getting older. I don't know if he's expecting more than the minimum by now. Like the contract he signed with the Eagles this year was barely over the minimum. It was for $1.12 million. The minimum is $1.035 million. So I'm wondering what Tartt means by that. But to me, I don't think the 49ers are going to roll with Tartt, despite my personal beliefs about Jaquiski Tartt as a player. It seems that the 49ers have their group so far. Their practice squad is outlined. They already have two safeties on there, and Tashawn Gibson, who they signed this past offseason when Jimmy Ward went down. And then Dante Johnson's the second guy. I think they're going to elevate at least one of them. I'd expect Gibson to be the elevation because Johnson obviously had the rib injury. I don't know if he's 100% yet or not, and I don't know if they want to risk it early or not. I think Gibson will get elevated, and you have four safeties. Tartt's obviously an interesting choice. Played here for a ton of time, but he is on the wrong side of 30, and obviously it seems like he wants more than the minimum, given his comments, which I just don't think is feasible for the 49ers for a player of his caliber at the moment. And given his free agent status, I don't know if the 49ers should reach for a contract that's worth more than the minimum, especially after they paid him the minimum last year, and now he's a year older.
And it's one of those things with Tartt. When he first got released, there was a lot of chatter around it. I took to Twitter and said that the 49ers should want to bring him back. As far as a player that can do it, bringing him back wouldn't be like out of the question, but it's got to be, the question is, does Jaquiski Tartt want the 49ers? And I think we're seeing that play out. You hit on it. The amount of money that Tartt was paid by the 49ers is almost identical to the contract he was given by the Philadelphia Eagles in free agency. There's something else that's there that's not being said. Right. I think there is. There's something that's not that he's that the comment that he's making about understanding his value. I think that the league is telling him what his value is. There's something else along with the lines with the 49ers that's an issue there.
I agree.
And that's why he's not.
I think if it's another team, if another team calls, he's gonna take that deal. It's just it doesn't seem like the kind of the breakup between the two went amicably or as well as it could possibly go. Like you said, I think there is something else there. And so while obviously I'm sure he'd love to play with this defense again, it just doesn't seem like that's a potential avenue at the moment.
Yeah, it just doesn't, they're not going to give him more than what they gave him last year. And Kevin, who's a member of the Toolbox, says, I thought it was on an $800 contract, $800K contract, but what's he expecting? He either wants to play or he doesn't. Is he holding out for a couple $100,000 and also demand respect? Well, here's the thing: is the way that Tartt's contract last year was actually $1.12 million. But because of there's an exception in there, the cap hit was actually lower in the $800,000 range. So while his cap hit was in the $800,000 range, the actual compensation to him was basically the same as what he got from the contract he signed with the Eagles. Yeah. So it is what it is. I don't know. When it comes to Tartt, I think he'd be a good get for the 49ers to have him on the roster. But at the same time, there's something else that's going on there that just, makes it not work out.
Yeah. I agree. And the last thing I'll say on it, I don't think Tart's going to sign until a starting spot opens up due to injury. Obviously, Tart spent this entire offseason as a third stringer with the Eagles, or a majority with the third stringer with the Eagles, and then he got cut. I don't know if he necessarily feels that, like, maybe that's what he's talking about, alluding to with his value. I think he probably views himself still as a starter after being a starter for so long with San Francisco. I think he's going to only re-sign with the team. He's at that stage in his career where he's a veteran. He'll only re-sign with the team when they need an availability due to injury.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point there as well. Real quick, I have a super chat here from Flav. Thank you for the 4.99. He says, "Hey Jack, saw your vid of Trey throwing the ball into the ground. Out of 10 throws, how many does Trey actually hit his guy in stride? Is the ground okay?" I got he later clarified what he meant by the ground okay. So I know that I've been posting those, and that one, the reason I posted that on there was, again, when we had when we saw the throw into the ground against Houston, there were a lot of different reasons given for why it wasn't a bad play, this and that and the other thing. And I had mentioned shortly after in some conversations on Twitter and on my YouTube film breakdown that was something we had seen happen during training camp on a couple of occasions where he would roll to his right or his left and he'd throw the ball into the ground, not even close to the receiver. It happened a few times. And then we saw it happen in a game. And then it happens again in practice yesterday. And it was a matter of just showing it. It's like, this is what's happened in practice. And we're seeing some of what he does manifest itself in games. And that was the only reason why I put that out there. Is the ground okay? Yeah, he didn't throw it that hard into the ground. I mean, he's got a strong arm, but he didn't throw it hard enough to damage the turf out on the practice field. So the ground is okay. That's not going on injured reserve anytime soon. And then in terms of Trey Lance's accuracy overall, it's interesting because you watch him throw, at least, I get to see him now during the practices that there's nobody there, but you watch him during like the warm-ups where they're just throwing to the trainers, and every once in a while he throws the ball over their head or underneath them, and it's almost seems like there's a couple a day, and usually they're on similar types of plays. It's usually when he's moving, which is odd. And then you watch him throw to receivers, and he's pretty much on target with most of those. And then he gets into the team period, and then you start to see the ball not go where it's supposed to, and things like that. So he's just inconsistent. And I would say out of 10, he's probably on the mark, 7, 8, 9 times out. He's fairly regular when it comes to the warm-up stuff. And then you get in the team, and the numbers are what they are. 57% last year, 59% this year in training camp. Some inaccurate throws in Houston and in the the extended playing time. I've heard it thrown out there that he had a 116 rating in the preseason. I mean, the guy threw 10 passes or something like that. I mean, he hardly threw the ball. So you talk about small sample sizes. That's a super small sample size to say that he had a 116 QB rating, and that's a big positive. But you take all of it together. There's some things to be concerned with, and there's some things to be excited about. So I think you need to go into this with understanding that it's not going to be all up, and there's going to be some ups and downs, and you need to be willing to accept those.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? It's going to be up and down, like you said. I was there. I could see it. The ups, you can clearly see that they're like, I don't want to say this to be a homer or anything, but the ups, you can see the upside, which is definitely higher than Jimmy Garoppolo's upside on the team. Not trying to compare the two, but there's also the lows, which you might not anticipate from a quarterback with such high potential from Trey Lance. And so to me, all I'm going to say is just wait through it, because the reason the 49ers spent 3 first-round picks was that they believe Trey Lance's ceiling is what they want, which is a Super Bowl ring. But you got to go through the process, which is why they insulated their team with such talent around Trey Lance, both offensively and defensively, so he could work through accuracy issues, so he could work through these other issues in general, and move forward to be a better quarterback when the playoffs and when the end of the season kind of arrives.
Yeah, and I think the other thing with Tartt, or not with Tartt, excuse me, but with Trey Lance, is there's going to be some, like I said, there's going to be the ups and downs. And I mentioned on Twitter, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, he doesn't need to be better than Jimmy Garoppolo right now for them to win games. He just needs to be better than Nick Mullins and C.J. Beathard and Brian Hoyer, because those guys were not they weren't competent NFL quarterbacks, and he just needs to be somebody who can go out there and make some plays, not turn the ball over, just be smart with the ball, take the shots when they're there, but don't put the ball in bad situations. When you get down to the red zone, if it's iffy, you eat it or run it. Things like that. Take the points. Don't make the stupid plays. Play within yourself, because those are the things. And again, I feel like the 2020 team is a playoff team if they have a quarterback that just doesn't turn the ball over left and right. And so that's the only reason why I say that. Plus, he's a lot cheaper than Garoppolo is, and so on and so forth. So it's good. Year one doesn't have to be better than Jimmy Garoppolo. Year two, okay. Year three, yeah, but not necessarily week one here in Chicago or really at any point throughout this year. I think this team is good enough where they can make a run as it is if the quarterback just doesn't turn the ball over and makes a play every once in a while.
Yep, agreed.
So that's it. That's the Trey Lance part. But let's get into the game a little bit. And we're going to talk about some Trey Lance stuff here. Before we do that, I do want to hit up. There's a super chat here that I want to hit up. It's from Jay Aguayo. He's going back to the comment on the discussion on Jaquiski Tartt. He says, Jack, maybe 49ers wait until after game one to sign Tartt.
I don't know. I think that right now, in my opinion, this could be wrong, obviously, but in my opinion, the earliest that you could potentially see Jaquiski Tartt being signed is week 4. And that's worst case scenario. If I think it's either 2 or 3 practice elevations. I forgot if they changed it this year to the active roster, but let's say the 49ers elevate Gibson twice, elevate Dante Johnson twice, and don't want to sign either player to the 53-man roster. Well, they can cut Gibson, add Tartt, and play him twice off an elevation. If I'm just saying just a potential scenario, but I don't think that they deviate from their players currently in the first weeks to sign Tartt, especially given his comments.
Yeah, I think they can. I think where he's going here is that waiting until a week into it, you can do some different things with the roster with them and those kind of things. But I don't know. I'm not too sure about it. We'll see. Again, based off of what he's saying, it doesn't sound like that's something he wants to do. And we'll keep an eye on it, though. I don't think it would be bad for the 49ers. Flav, another super chat, says, as someone that has been there every day for years, is there any noticeable difference between Trey's accuracy and Jimmy's, in your opinion? Well, I haven't been there for years. Last year was my first year. So I don't have a lot of I wasn't there for the since 17 through 20 with Garoppolo. I only got last year was my first up close look at it. I'd watched everything on TV like everybody else up until that point. I'll say this about Garoppolo: he is very good. He's underappreciated what he can do between the numbers, over the middle in tight windows where there's a lot of people. The middle of the field is very congested. His ability to put the ball in on people, I think, has been underappreciated by 49er fans. The difference, though, is that Lance is going to give you some other throws that Garoppolo can't make from a accuracy standpoint. I would say for the most part, Garoppolo's a little bit more accurate in on a regular basis. But again, you're hoping that Lance's accuracy can get to the point where he can put the ball on guys. I was thinking about that comment I just made. I've been thinking about that over the last couple of days about, how often Garoppolo and the 49ers throw the ball over the middle, and Lance struggling a little bit in there. And, we saw the interceptions during training camp. And, the part of it was there was kind of the joke about Garoppolo not being able to see the safety, the box safety coming down. And I posted a video on Twitter from an OTA practice that they got leaked that from somebody else and put it up there. And you see Lance doing the same thing. And we saw Lance do that in training camp practices as well. Throw those balls over the middle and get picked off by the safety that's sitting right in front of him or a linebacker that's sitting in front of him. I think part of it is just the 49ers offense is very middle of the field centric. You have a lot of tight windows and you've got to be very accurate with the ball. And it causes turnovers in the middle of the field.
Yeah. I mean, in the Garoppolo style offense, right, we've seen that it's been middle centric. Hence, you've seen Garoppolo's throwing charts. So that is a good point. I think with the accuracy, you can make, I mean, if you're talking strictly numbers, Garoppolo's accuracy has been amongst the highest in the NFL, or at least somewhere pretty high in the NFL in general. But accuracy boils down to several aspects, right? The deep, the short, the intermediate, and it also doesn't always boil down to just plain accuracy, but does he hit him on the body? Does he hit him on the chest plate? Is it is it a hard catch that the receiver makes in general? That's another thing as well.
Yeah, and that's why just looking at completion percentage as the only way of measuring accuracy isn't the best way of doing it. You've got to you can that's a data point, and then you put in what you've seen with your eyes, and you can see the plays like the 7 of 11 against Houston. I think it was 7-11 was the number. There was a couple of inaccurate throws there. There was there was at least one completion that wasn't an accurate throw, which the receivers having to go down for and things like that. So it's just an interesting piece to discuss. Thanks for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Raphael 569ers wants to remind everybody to hit that like button and subscribe. So please do that. Rohan, let's get into it. Let's get into the game on Sunday. 49ers, Bears. What are some of your big takeaways? Or let me ask you, let's do it this way. Offensively, what are your keys to the game for the 49ers?
Offensively, I want to first see running the football be efficient, right? This is a Bears defense that isn't necessarily one of the better defenses in the NFL in general when you talk about the Bears, right? Like they lost Khalil Mack, they lost Akeem Hicks, they lost a solid amount of players on that defense. Even in the secondary, it's a more revamped secondary where they're starting rookies Kyler Gordon and starting Jaquan Brisker. I want to see a ton of running overall in general, and I want to see the 49ers trying to move the football on the ground, which then facilitates the passing game, facilitates the play action game. That's the main thing. The 49ers should have the advantage in the trenches on the offensive line versus the defensive line. I want to see, obviously, Trent Williams in action. And if George Kittle isn't there, that's another added bonus towards, or not bonus, but incentive towards rushing the football. So Elijah Mitchell, Jeff Wilson Jr., get those two involved, and then maybe even open up some extra carries for a guy like Tyron Davis-Price or Jordan Mason as the game prolongs, because that is what's going to help Lance facilitate the offense with a little more comfortability.
Yeah, I think the running game is going to be big in this one. Like you said, it's going to be big for the 49ers all year long. Their ability to run the ball. I wrote the other day about Lance's ability to kind of open up the running game, at least in the two starts that he had last year. Again, small sample size, but his two starts, the 49ers average just over 5 yards a carry compared to around 4.25 with Garoppolo. So there's a big jump there. My thing is, can they get the ball going on the ground? And then on top of that, can they be efficient? I think that's the other piece here. Can the offense be efficient enough to stay on the field and put points on the board? Because that's been a little bit of a struggle for them during training camp. We obviously know the 49ers defense is better than than most defenses in the NFL, but still that ability to stay on the field and move the ball periods in practice was a struggle. They didn't really do a great job of it in the preseason either, but we also didn't see the full starting offensive line out there. So it's going to be interesting to see, can the offense stay on the field, move the ball, and just be efficient?
Yeah, no, definitely. You talk about being efficient. That's another thing, right? You talk about the move the ball period. We saw extended times where when it wasn't a real game situation, Trey Lance would sometimes falter, be having those up and down days, maybe try and throw the deep ball. The 49ers are trying to implement different things. Now it's 60 minutes of full real game experience. How does the offense change in a way, and how can the 49ers continue to move the ball down the field? The one other thing I want to mention before we continue with takeaways is penalties, right? The 49ers last year did have their fair share of penalties. That's, in my opinion, the one kind of big factor that could potentially hold them back in this game, because offensively and defensively, they have the distinct advantage at almost every position in general. There are a couple of toss-ups. You could definitely argue for a couple of positions for the Bears, but it's the things that are kind of out of the just the pure rosters. That's what you have to wonder. And so that's what I'm wondering about penalties and things like that. How do they work?
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I agree there. Those are all. Which one of the 49ers is that walking behind you right there? I'm kidding.
That
I'm
was
joking.
actually George Kittle. He just he was talking to me about how he's going to miss week 1. No, I'm kidding.
All right. So on the offensive side of the ball, I think we're both on the same page. They need to run the ball, kind of be able to control the clock, help the defense out a little bit in that way. I said a little bit about being efficient. I think you're going to see some plays off. Obviously, Lance is going to have to make a few plays with his arm as well. What about over on the defensive side? What are some of your keys on the defensive side?
Yeah, defensively against this Bears offense, I want to point to last year. You would have thought the 49ers would have beaten this Bears team given the complexion of the teams by a good amount. No, they won only 30-22 last year, and it was when they were at 2-4. This game propelled them to 3-4, but the Bears, they worked through Justin Fields. 49ers struggled to contain him. He had 10 rushes for 101 yards last year and was able to move around in general. That was an added bonus for Justin Fields in his game. So to me, I think the 49ers need to find a way to contain Justin Fields, specifically D'Amico Ryans. He's got to hear a game tape. It was a funny comment earlier today when we heard from D'Amico that the guy who they've been using as scout team is Jimmy Garoppolo to picture Justin Fields with. Maybe two completely different quarterbacks, but overall, I think you got to contain Justin Fields, get him less comfortable, force him to stay in the pocket where he might not have as much experience, obviously, coming into a second year, and where he has to now make throws.
Yeah, no, it's that, and that's it. And it's hard to do, right? It's hard to keep those guys. I think when it comes uh, to managing the rush against somebody like Justin Fields, it's not so much that you need to relax and just kind of stay in front of them. It's a matter of you can be aggressive, but you have to be aggressive and stay in your lanes. You can't jump into a gap just because you think you're going to get there. You need to be able to stay. You need to keep your pass rush lane integrity. They have different, they have different. Those lanes are different depending on what they call us for the defense. But on the base, there's always landmarks that they have on the quarterback. So depending on how he's moving, those four guys, if you just have four guys coming in, they kind of move around. And it's the same thing when you're bringing blitzes. Everybody has like a landmark that they need to get to, because if everybody gets there, there shouldn't be a way for the quarterback to escape and all that kind of stuff. So that's a long way of explaining when I say pass rush integrity, what I'm talking about there. But I think they can do that. They're going to struggle a little bit with him. You mentioned it. They did it last year on the one big play. If they can limit that and keep them in the pocket, I think the 49ers, it'll play to the 49ers strength, which is their linebackers and secondary as well with that.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, if they can bring him down sacks wise, because the Bears don't have a strong offensive line necessarily, right? They're starting a rookie 5th-round pick in Braxton Jones at left tackle. I believe their left guard is Riley Reef for the year, but you've got new pieces there all around at all 5 positions. Larry Borum is now your right tackle after starting, I believe, on the left side to begin the offseason. You have new and inexperienced pieces in general. 49ers should have the distinct advantage with their deep defensive line. Now, you can get the pressures. Can you now result with the play ending in a sack? Can you force Justin Fields to get it out quickly? Where obviously, like you said, depend on the strengths of your linebackers and cornerbacks and defensive backs to kind of play well in coverage for the first 2.5 seconds. Can the 49ers win that battle in the trenches quickly and often so that it forces Justin Fields' hand, which then obviously in reality keeps the defense on the field, provides more comfortability for Trey Lance and the offense, and overall gives the 49ers the control of the game.
Yeah, and we're talking a lot about Justin Fields, and I think the other big question here is, can the 49ers defense can they stop the run? They lost A.J. Jones, big man in the middle. They struggled a lot against the run in the early part of last season. What do you think? Is 49ers defense going to be able to, because that's kind of a strength of Chicago is their running game. They have a couple of really good backs. One of them didn't play against the 49ers last year when the 49ers did win. Do you think that might play a little bit into the Bears' favor?
I think that's tough because the running game is a very interesting metric because it's not only about the running backs, it's about the offensive line in general. And like I just mentioned, it's untested against a pretty strong 49ers defensive line that has players that are better suited against the run and better suited against the pass. So you might see maybe an additional couple of reps from Jordan Willis or some guy like that who is better suited against the run. But to me, I think the 49ers are pretty set with that rush defense. You talk about how they did struggle last year until week 8 when Arik Armstead slid in with DJ Jones and they formed that nice duo. I think Javon Kinlaw is a solid player. I'm not going to look at the run necessarily too much in this game, given the lack of the offensive line or lack of a above average offensive line for the Bears, where I think the 49ers will dominate. I think, though, that's a good question. With Javon Kinlaw in the fold, a guy who has been kind of known as a run stopper in his career, unfortunately, he has had the injuries as well. Will the 49ers be able to consistently stop the run as the season prolongs? I think that that's a question. I do, though, think that they hold the advantage defending the run in week 1.
Okay. And then the last piece is in the secondary. They have a lot of new faces, not necessarily guys that are new to playing in the NFL, but they do have a lot of new faces in there. I think Travaris Ward, I think we both would say that Travaris Ward looked very good in training camp early on before the hamstring injury. Same thing with Emmanuel Mosley. I think we both were high on what we saw from Samuel Womack as well. But the question here is Jimmy Ward not out there. How does that impact the back end of the Flyers defense, in your opinion?
It definitely becomes interesting, right? Because now you have Talanoa Hufanga and probably George Odom, who's going to start week 1, with Tarvarius Moore in the fold as well. All three safeties have different skill sets in a way. Hufanga and Odom might be seen a little more in the box, but we've seen 2 high sets, we've seen single high sets, and I think that Tarvarius Moore should get some run given his athleticism. But now you're trusting safeties who don't have as much game experience or aren't as talented as Jimmy Ward. I am very interested to see, how does D'Amico Ryan scheme this defense? Does he rely a lot more on his cornerbacks, some newer pieces like Travarius Ward and Samuel Womack in this defense, or does he continue to try and utilize his safeties as normal? Remember, Jimmy Ward, a guy who's played in the box, in the slot, and in 2 high shells as a single or 2 high or single high as a safety up top. He's played in all 3 positions pretty consistently over the last 2 years. You don't necessarily have a guy who can do that for the 49ers right now in that safety room. So do they use a triage of players to try and fill that role, or do they rely on the cornerbacks? It's an interesting development for sure, and that's something that D'Amico Ryan's going to have to handle. Again, maybe not necessarily as much this week, but one thing with receivers in the NFL, they always have the advantage against cornerbacks. Even if their skill level is lower, it's easier to play receiver than cornerback. And they do have Darnell Mooney. They've got a speedster, a young rookie in Velus Jones Jr., and they've got everybody's favorite player, Dante Pettis, over there at receiver as well. I'm kidding, but you gotta talk about just in general the new safety group. They're going to have a tough task, but I think it's also on D'Amico Ryans in a way to figure out a way to kind of shield them as a little bit while playing them to their strengths.
Yeah. You mentioned the fact that they got that the Bears have the 49ers. Not only it's not even the 49ers just going up against the Bears. They also need to deal with a cat too. I mean, that's the problem. They got all kinds of animals coming at them in Chicago. Oh, I'm throwing up the comment from the Ghost of Judah Tribe. He's a Bear fan. Don't need to get into it, but I wanted to make sure he paid for it, so I figured I'd put it up there. I think for me, when I look at this secondary group, I'm a little nervous about George Odom just based off of what we saw from him in the amount in his game against Houston. There were a couple of missed tackles by him that led to big plays or bigger plays. And that's one of the things that Jimmy Ward is so good at. One of the things that's so underappreciated about Jimmy Ward is if it's going to be the play is good enough to be a 15-yard gain, he makes a tackle at 15 yards. If it's a 10-yard gain, he makes a tackle at 10. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't usually miss tackles and let plays go for bigger yardage than what they're supposed. Then when he gets there, the play is made. And we saw on a run play where Odom missed the tackle and it went for a big gain, and then we saw a pass into the flat on the left side of the Flyers defense where he misses the tackle and it goes for a big gain. Those are both on the scoring drive that the Texans had. And so I'm just a little nervous about that going forward. And Odom has been a starter in the NFL before. He started 7 games, I think it was last year for Indy.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing. It's just he's not Jimmy Ward, and playing alongside Talon Hufanga, I've been saying that Hufanga is going to do well, but not having Jimmy Ward there gives me a little bit of nerves when it comes to Talon Hufanga's ability too, because Hufanga's been at his best when he's had Ward on the field with him.
Agreed. And I mean, it also relieves him of some responsibility where he can play his role because Ward can do whatever is needed on the defense. So Hufanga now kind of has a little more responsibility. And it is small sample size, but back then in week 8, we did see Hufanga struggle a bit to cover the deep end. I wonder how much the 49ers will have him cover the deep end. Now, I think he's a better player than he was in his rookie season. He looks more instinctual, definitely looks more of a leader. You've seen him talking a bit defensively in training camp. I want to see how does he develop, but how does he play in this game without Jimmy Ward? Good question to answer, and it is going to be a tougher task for week 1 without obviously the top dog out there.
Yeah, and so it'll be interesting. And then before I let you go, I can't let you off the hook without asking you for a score prediction. What do you think the score is going to be on Sunday?
So, what did I talked about this actually with Sunil earlier this week. Okay. I got to remember what I said. I didn't think it was going to be that what do I call it? That lopsided. I know you're going to talk about it. While I remember, I want to hear yours actually first, and then I'll go with mine.
Oh man, see, I tried to get you to say yours first so that I could come use your number to help myself. I see what you did right there. You just turned my strategy around on me, didn't you? So Rohan over here playing 4D chess like Kyle Shanahan, according to some people. No, I think it's going to be a tighter game than people are thinking it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be a blowout by the 49ers. This is one of those games where, I think there's some matchup issues that the running game for Chicago, if they can get the running game going, and then you get Justin Fields playing off it. I think both these teams are very similar in that if you get the running game going, the quarterbacks can then come off of those very well, both with Fields and with Lance. The Bears are playing an offensive style that's very similar to the 49ers, so that's going to help them out a little bit, I think, because their offense coordinator is coming from Green Bay.
Right.
So that might help out a little bit. But I think this game, if I was going to give a score, I'm going to say something like I'm going to go 17-13 49ers, something like that.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
The other part too is, okay, we've heard a lot about how good Trey Lance was in his 2 starts last year, how good he was against Houston. Well, the 49ers offense had 10 points against Houston through 3 quarters in that week 17 game. They'd only had scored 10 points. They only scored 10 points total against Arizona for the game. So in his first 7 quarters as the starting quarterback of the 49ers, they scored 20 points total. So to think that they're going to come out and just blow them out, they could, but I think I'm going to play it a little bit tighter and say 17-13 like I just mentioned.
I think that's fair. What I'm going to say is what I was thinking was 24-13, a touchdown higher. The reason being, I think the 49ers offense could get more opportunities because the defense will get off the field a little more. And so I think the added opportunities might allow for some extra drives, especially once Lance gets in a groove. I don't think it'll be a high-scoring game necessarily. I could definitely see 17-13 being a possibility, but that's my score prediction for now, 24-13.
So we both have 13 for the defense, and you have 7 more points on the offensive side. So I think we're both. I think our numbers are going to be relatively close. It's probably going to end up being 20-13, right? Right. It's going to put our number right down the middle. But no, really quick before we move on, there was a super chat here from James Foster. He says, thank you for the donation, James. He says week 2 versus Seattle will be the upset domination this week. So James thinks the 49ers are going to blow out the Bears and that they might get upset at home in week 2 against Seattle.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't know about that because I think Seattle might be worse than I originally anticipated. So we'll see. Hopefully the Niners have a period here where they have 6 games that I think they can win all of them. If they can get out of this with 4-2, I think they're okay. If they're less than 4-2, it's time to start to panic a little bit. So we'll see how it works out. Rohan, what do you have going on? I know you're out in Wisconsin. Are you writing about the Badgers already, or what's going on?
Yeah, actually, last week, this Saturday, because college football is Saturday, was my first credentialed game. Was up in the press box. Did have a little bit of a write up over there on SB Nation and with the school newspaper, the Daily Cardinal. That's all continuing this week. Game is on Saturday, so stay tuned on my channel for a post game recap. Might be having some behind the scenes kind of gigs going on as well, so I'll be sure to update y'all. But 49ers, that's the big thing. They play this Sunday. We'll see if me and Marco can do an episode before then, but if not, we'll catch you guys on the post game. But Jack, what about you? What do you got going on?
Well, I've got a write up coming up in the Press Democrat tomorrow. It'll be my my pregame story because I'm going to be traveling on Saturday, so I'll get that up tomorrow, probably later in the day. That'll be my 5 burning questions. That's something I've been doing for a long time, going back to when I was somebody at the Inside the 49ers blog, at the Press Democrat. When I was a commenter there, I started doing that. And then I took it to my own blog, and then one thing led to another, and I've been doing it for years, and so that's how I do my pregame write up, and so that'll come out tomorrow, and then you'll see the answers to that. And on Sunday after the game, I'll be out in Arizona or in Chicago. I'll be doing a pregame show while I'm out there. Post game show, there'll be write ups and everything like that. So check it out. Keep yourself locked into the channel here. Get yourselves over to 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. Been detailing and writing out what my plan's going to be, because starting on Monday, it's going to be kind of the same on a regular basis in terms of the flow of the content that you're going to see. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to see kind of an overreaction Monday, film day, Tuesday, and then you start getting into the new team on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, and lead you into the burning questions and then the answers to those, during the game. So keep it locked in. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope everybody enjoys it, and it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like he got a packed schedule. And so definitely appreciate you having me on, and appreciate the chat for sure. Chat always popping over here with, I think you call it the toolbox, right? So toolbox always popping. Appreciate all you guys for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then James Foster, he had the super chat earlier. He says 5 burning questions is a legit. James is one of the guys who's been a longtime reader of the Press Democrat blog, and so I really appreciate him jumping over here with us on the YouTube channel as well. Thank you for saying that, James. And then, like Raphael5629er says, if you guys can hit that like button and subscribe on your way out, it would be greatly appreciated. Hit that like button. When you hit that subscribe button, also hit the little bell notification so you know when we go live, and then make 49ers.pressdemocrat.com a favorite on your web browser and check it out on a daily basis. Other than that, Rohan, man, I'm so glad that we got a chance to talk. I know you're busy with your stuff, and I really appreciate you making the time to come on.
100%. Can't wait for the next one.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Check it back tomorrow. There'll be something coming up tomorrow, and then go into the weekend. So take care, everybody. Have a good night.